Hey, y'all, it's Mandy. Before we dive into this week's episode, I just want to take a moment and thank my patrons and premium subscribers who have been here partnering with me to create this work. I love doing this with a team. So if you are interested in being someone who creates this resourcing for people who live in care deserts or who just don't have a safe community to discuss grief, check out the show notes to become a patron of the show. You'll get access to monthly bonus episodes as well as our live chat over on Discord. And I would love to hear from you. Okay, that's all I had to say. Now let's get into this week's episode. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 79, titled Overcoming Community Loss with Micah Morgan. When we are suffering through a loss, one of the secondary sources of pain that we encounter is often a loss of our community. We can't quite put our finger on it, but something has changed. Whether our people are no longer our people, or maybe we've had to leave our community completely, we are now navigating a loss that feels a little bit like a bowl of spaghetti. Everything is intertwined. Micah Morgan is a bivocational, trauma-informed licensed professional counselor and serving currently as a pastor at her church in Columbus, Ohio. Over the years, her work has drawn her deeply into studying relational styles, neurobiological responses to trauma, and exploring how our interconnectedness as humans fuels our need for community, as well as the depth of our pain when we exist without one. I'm so excited for you to hear from Micah today because she is a wealth of insight and thoughtful curiosity for healing. So get ready to feel seen, my friends. Well, my friends, welcome back to Restorative Grief. I am here today with one of the most magical unicorn humans I've ever found. I loved her work online because she's just so authentic and beautiful. And so I'm excited to have my lovely friend, Miss Micah Morgan, on the show today.
Hello, Mandy. It's always a pleasure to get to interact with you, whether it's even on Twitter or here on the podcast. I'm really grateful.
Yeah, and you making time for this is going to be so powerful because community loss is what we're diving into today. And, you and I have talked about it on our own quite a few times, but this conversation comes up so frequently in my work. I'm certain it comes up in yours. So
Mhm.
before we go head first, why don't you just take a moment and tell our listeners who you are and what work you do?
Yeah, so right now I'm serving as a licensed professional counselor in Columbus, Ohio. And the places where I've been most supportive and successful with helping folks is in trauma-informed care, mostly working with teens and adults and couples who have a trauma history or who are living with mood disorders or anxiety disorders. And I'm also serving on the pastoral staff at my church. And so I've just got a lot of ways that that folks have graciously allowed me to come alongside of them and to help them in their healing process.
I love that you focus too on the trauma informed part of it because you want to believe that that's uh, goes without saying in professional care, but we know very well that it doesn't. And so
Mm.
I think more than anything, that's one of the biggest qualifiers that you have coming into this conversation because of the nuance that comes along with navigating community loss and wrestling with all of the traumas that come from losing a community that's so important to you. So, thank
Yeah.
you. Before we start talking about the loss itself, I'd love to hear from you why community matters. Why can't we just be lone wolves or have one or two people that we rely on wholeheartedly?
Mm, yeah. That is the question, huh? I think it really does begin with understanding how we're formed as humans. The way we develop is so thoroughly based upon our caregiving community. And of course, that begins with the person who births us and the nutrients that they provide, in the womb, and the way that we learn how to regulate from our brain stems by kind of mimicking the rhythm of their heartbeat. Like that is deeply relational. But then after we're born, you have an immediate caregiving community, which hopefully is comprised of at least two folks. Um, but what's interesting is that our relational templates, our attachment styles, rely on a diversity of other nervous systems to kind of interact with during those first 18 months or so of life. And so you've got the original kind of caregiver who birthed you, and then hopefully at least one other person who you get to interact with and learn the rhythm of serve and return, of returning and giving eye contact and crying and getting your needs met and playing and laughing, all of those things we have to learn in community. And there's been so many replicated studies and even anecdotal ways that we've looked at what happens to us when we don't have that, and how we as humans can't thrive if we don't have that connection from a very early age. Um, and so that to me is where this question of like, why is community important begins? Because we must be formed in community in order to thrive. Um, but there's also a second element that I think is really important, which is the fact that we actually need the gaze of others to more deeply and accurately understand ourselves. We like to think we have a pretty accurate picture of ourselves, but
Yeah.
again, the more we research human behavior, the more we learn that we tend to overestimate our positive features and our negative features actually. And so we need the gaze of others to kind of check in with, and have folks that we trust and we feel safe with tell us like, hey, this is how you show up in this space, and this is how I experience you. And we get to kind of put that alongside of our self-awareness and get a fuller picture of who we are. But when we're isolated, there's a higher chance that we have a distorted view of ourselves. But then finally, we heal best in community. Our nervous systems need the interactions with folks that we trust, in order to heal a lot of the wounds that actually happen in relationships. So I think those are three things that come to mind. We're formed in relationship. We need relationship to deeply understand ourselves and more fully understand ourselves. And then finally, we need relationship and community to heal.
The depth of what you just described is so formative. It's baseline. Community is our baseline. Without it, we can't. I
Mm.
sometimes say, you can't see the back of your own head. Your friends are like a mirror to tell you when your hair is out of place.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
So, oh gosh, that's so beautiful. I want to sit and I just want to sit with that for a while. But what you said last, that third point, we heal best in community. So
Mm.
much of what we've experienced is in this life is going to be out of a connection to other people, right? We're relational beings, like you said, and we absolutely get our wounding from other people, but we also get our healing from it. And I feel like a lot of people listening are probably grieving the loss of a community that is maybe faith-based. Maybe they
Mm.
moved and they no longer have their school community or their neighborhood, or even like a book club. So community to me is more than just, I mean, it includes our family as well, of course, but it's so multifaceted. Um, but
Absolutely.
why? So with that, why would the loss of a community, regardless of the demographics of it, be something that's more than just, okay, I moved and now I'm in a new school? Like, how is that loss going to be compounded or more complex?
Well, the first thing I want to kind of think out loud about is how a loss of community disrupts our sense of safety and can even disrupt our sense of self. And a lot of that has to do with the way that we're socialized. Again, going back to the reality that we are socialized in relationship. Um, but our understanding of how safe we are relationally and physically, we understand that through the lens of how connected we feel with others, how safe we feel around others. And so if you have a significant community loss, a lot of us experience this kind of angstiness, like this anxiety
Mhm.
within. It's difficult to articulate, but really what that is your nervous system basically like crying out, like, bro, we just lost 20 units to 150 units of relational safety that we were used to having every week. And now we don't have that. And I don't quite know how to feel safe in this new context without that. Like that's often what our nervous systems are feeling. And so I think it's helpful to put words to that, because I think a lot of what I've seen in folks that have trusted me with serving them, whether it's pastorally or in a clinical therapeutic relationship, is when they've had that community loss, they feel this irritability and this kind of fear that wasn't there before, and they don't have words for it. And so being able to say to them, what you're feeling is a response to almost a new nakedness, that your nervous system is trying to make sense of, and that's okay. Your nervous system is saying, yes, I need community and I'm grieving having lost it. And so let's work with that. Let's work and start with that truth first, that your sense of safety has changed. But secondly, I think what's helpful to understand is that there's so many things that we get from our community that we maybe are just so used to having access to without having to really think about it until we
Mm.
lose it.
Mhm.
And that could be like the more abstract things, like you get kind of a convenient echo chamber where folks who think like you echo back to you a lot of your thoughts very easily in conversation. And so when you lose that, sometimes you're kind of like, crap, like who am I going to talk to about this? Like I don't have my group chat anymore. I don't feel comfortable reaching out to like the same Facebook or Twitter friends after this community lot. Like who am I going to think out loud with? So there's kind of more abstract losses, secondary losses like that. But then there's very tangible losses like childcare for parents.
Yeah.
Like you used to be able to just call up some folks that you saw every week, and say like, man, I got to go do this thing. I got to go take this trip this weekend. Would you mind watching my kids for tonight? And you lose that abruptly. Like, yeah, that feels like the rug has been pulled from under you. But it's something you don't really notice until like you finally decided to leave that job, or you finally decided to leave that church, or through church hurt or spiritual abuse you've been pushed out of a church space, and now it's 3 months later and you don't know who to call, you don't know who to text. It's
Yeah.
those losses that can really kind of like re-traumatize us sometimes, because you discover them after the fact.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking about all of the different community losses that I hadn't really named yet in my own experience as well, knowing that they were certainly moments of, like you said, recognizing, "Oh, I don't know that I can trust that person with this big
Mm,
heavy thing." And even though there is the element of echo chamber in a community, I was one that always cultivated a relatively safe community for me to push back, meaning
yeah.
I can say big things and know that it's not going to end the conversation or the relationship. And that's been something for years that I've been trying to cultivate and ensure that I'm
Mm,
in good relationships with people. So I think
yeah.
it's such an interesting mode of self-protection that we move into when our community changes, that I don't think we allow ourselves to really even get close enough to what you're talking about to say, "Oh, actually, I'm scared of being hurt again," because that hurt is so big. I don't
Yeah.
I don't even know, like, how I can begin to rebuild or how I can make friends again. We always say, like, it's so hard to make friends as an adult, and for a while, I was really cheeky, and I just said, "No, it's not, watch me." But, like, being an aggressive extrovert doesn't make it easy to make friends, it just means I talk to a lot of people. And recognizing that nuance has made me realize, okay, like, there's actually a lot of self-protection in that kind of behavior, in that willingness to just go forward and say, "This is who I am, take it or leave it." But, it's
Yeah.
also it's just a coping mechanism. So, I'm curious what you would say, for someone who is hearing this and thinking like, "Oh my gosh, she's talking so much about the body, really reacting to loss." And
Mm.
I love that that's something, and the nervous system is something you work with so intentionally. What then can we do if we look at the whole person with, thoughts in their head, emotions in their heart, feelings in their bodies, and connections or disconnections in their spirit, right? How would you help someone begin to check in with themselves and rebuild trust with moving into a new community, whatever that community looks like?
Whew. Yeah. That is a really great question. And I want to encourage that. I hope I'm doing a good job of encouraging that, of doing this, kind of rebuilding with the whole body. I think that's so important. Some things that come to mind um, include that kind of first piece of accepting that when you do start kind of rebuilding or entering a new community with consistency, there is going to be, kind of like you just said so well, this mistrust that you're kind of battling. Um, and I want to encourage folks to accept that that is a normal response, because really, as much as we'd like to think that we enter every interaction or new relationship with a clean slate, we really don't. um, our past experiences shape what we kind of instinctively believe about a new experience. And so if you've come out of a very painful community loss, you're entering a new space, yeah, you're going to be a little bit more self-protective. But what I want to invite folks to think about is their values. So kind of stepping back as much as you're able to get into a space where you feel calm and you've got kind of a clear mind. Step back and think back to that painful community loss and kind of affirm for yourself the things that were important to you that were taken away. Um, those are your values. Like, we are really passionate about keeping in our lives the things that are kind of non-negotiables, like, like, if a person is just like completely unconcerned with how I feel, I don't really want to kind of interact with that person frequently. Like, that is a value. And a lot of times that comes up in our conflicts, it comes up in the community losses that we've had. But if we can reflect on those things and we can answer the question, like, what is really important to me, then those things can actually become guides for how we rebuild community in the future. It becomes guides for who we say yes to trusting with our space. It becomes a guide for who maybe we set harder boundaries with. So I really encourage that as a second kind of commitment to ourselves, that, you know what, I'm going to reflect on what's important to me, and I'm going to use that as a guide for how I kind of operate in this space, whatever that new space is. But then I think thirdly, there, this is kind of hard to articulate, but there really are kind of anchors to community that come up more organically. And those anchors tend to be the people that you kind of immediately vibe with. Like, you just feel really safe with them. The cadence of your speech kind of falls, into place really easily. Your sense of humor matches. And I want to encourage folks to pay attention to those moments, and don't be afraid to seek out those folks, in whatever this new space is that you're, rebuilding community in, or getting connected to. Um, because those actually are the folks that are gonna probably end up anchoring you into that communal space. There's going to be other relationships that feel more peripheral or don't feel like they fall into places easily, and that's okay. That's a part of, being a human in a group space. Um, but I just encourage folks to lean into that. Like even when I'm working with clients and they've just started a new job or they've just, started at a new church, I'll ask, like, who are those folks that you feel like you're vibing with? Like you were in the lobby at church and you were just like, you know what, I like being around that person. The thing is, our nervous systems are telling us this on kind of the subconscious level, because what you're feeling is a connection that is lower than kind of our cortex or our higher level of thinking. And I want to encourage folks to honor that, and to build on that.
Man, I want to share a little story that resonates just to affirm exactly what you said because you are 100% correct. Recently, I had my own experience in that realm. I was having a massive anxiety attack. I was surrounded by a bunch of new people and had the honor of sitting with a few people that said, I see you. Like, I took a risk and said, I'm having an anxiety attack, gang. So this is fun. And I'm in an unsafe, like,
Mm,
not unsafe, but unfamiliar territory here. But like I said, I tend to be pretty extroverted and bold. I'm going to try and just be honest and find out if these folks sink or swim for me. Like,
mm,
these might be my people, they may not. And within an hour or 2, a lot was happening internally, and I'm pretty aware of my own nervous system and what's going on. But there was a moment towards the end of the evening, and then again through the next few times we were together, that I absolutely noticed my nervous system regulating in relationship to
mm.
how physically close I was to these individuals. And by the end of our time together, I was laughing about it and said, "We need to, like, define the relationship a few times because we've become like really close friends over a short period of time." And we were all commenting on how, yeah, it's weird, right? And I said, it's really not. Our nervous systems are recognizing safety. And so that actually creates this incredible depth where you can go really intimate with your conversations really quickly and trust that you're going to remain safe. And when you remove yourself from that, it can feel like a loss even in that moment, and I remember leaving and bursting into tears, knowing I don't know
Mm,
when I'll get to see these people again. I know that I will, like, that's no question, but the intensity of that regulated nervous system after years of lacking that safety
yeah.
in relationship it was life altering, it truly was. And so when you say, "Pay attention to who you're vibing with," it's so meaningful, it's so important. I mean, that's kind of how you and I connected. I saw you in the
Mm,
world of Twitter, and I just thought, "I think she's one I can go after." And I mean, even some of the things you're saying, I'm giggling to myself because 'cause I'm like, "We didn't plan this whole conversation," but you even use the language that I use with grief clients, and so it's just beautiful when you really do take the risk to
yeah.
find someone that's going to be that grounding presence for you, but it's not necessarily, I don't know. I think we try to think and feel, like emote our way through those experiences, and our emotions are honestly just information for us, and yet we
Mhm.
allow them to drive the boat instead of saying, "Oh, thank you, emotion. I see there's an iceberg ahead. I'll go ahead and steer. You don't need to veer off course immediately. We can casually go around the iceberg," you know? Like,
Yes.
Micah, I'm curious too. I'm sure you've learned a lot of this for yourself through school, but also the hard way. Have you experienced a community loss that changed the way that you approach yourself showing up in community? I ask that with this caveat, um, because I know a lot of people listening have struggled with their sense of identity and their sense of self, specifically coming out of faith communities, but also dealing
Mm,
with families where they have a lack of acceptance for who they are, or dealing with partners who are suddenly not who they thought they were, and there's this absolute loss of identity that goes along with it.
in short, yes, I have experienced really hard community loss. And what's weird is like it all happened so recently. Like when I think about this conversation of community loss, I don't feel myself naturally recalling memories of like leaving a school necessarily as a teen or anything like that. Like those felt very natural and kind of a part of life. But the ones that come to mind now that happened, within the last, decade or so, um, typically came out of either, an event within a relationship where I discovered that my trust was misplaced, or that there was a significant misalignment of values in terms of a church space, or it's just looking back on it, it's like, my goodness, it was so abrupt, and it was so, I just didn't see it coming. um and so that piece about this disrupted sense of safety was something that I really discovered through the most recent losses of community that I've experienced, because it really did leave me thinking like, oh my goodness, like who can I trust? Who can I reach out to in a difficult time? Or who can I think out loud with? And like you said earlier, expect that if I'm pushing back on a thought, it's not going to result in the loss of a friendship. Um, that those questions became so abruptly difficult to answer. Um, but as I've healed from them, what I'm left with is first confident a more confident affirmation of my values, um, a more confident affirmation of what is important to me within a relationship, and really being willing to advocate for it on this side of that community loss. It's been this weird change in my ideas about consent within relationships, and really allowing people to show me to what extent they're willing to, if I come to them and say like, hey, you've hurt me in this way, would you mind treating me this other way in the future? Really accepting that if that person shows me or says to me, no, I actually don't want to give you what you're asking of me, or treat you in this way that would make you feel safer, I'm now more willing to accept it. Like, okay, then I get to set boundaries that help me feel more safe. But I'm gonna believe you when you tell me that you don't consent to treating me in a way that helps me feel safe and loved.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I'm not gonna try to convince you to love me better. I'm not gonna try to earn, more affection from you. And that has been my goodness. Looking back, I've realized that a lot of the relationships that I don't have right now anymore were kind of shaped in this striving that I was having of trying to get them to love me in a way that they had already said, like, I either don't have the skills to love you that way, Micah, or I don't want to love you that way. And so now on this side of it, I'm kind of like, yeah, if you don't have the skill or the will to love me that way, then I pray blessings for you, but I'm not going to open myself up to be hurt by you to the extent that I did before.
Yeah.
Um, so those are a couple things that come to mind. I think I just affirm my values a lot more. I'm also more in tune with my nervous system and like how I feel on a subconscious level around people, and really kind of using that, like you said, as a piece of the story. And I'm more curious about it now. I don't allow it to be the full story, right? Because I know there's more information to get, but it's kind of like, oh, like I feel really kind of anxious in this space. I wonder where that's coming from. Is there a
Yeah.
memory that this is attached to, or some kind of sensory impression that it's kind of recalling back to me? Being curious about that, and then deciding how much discomfort am I willing to kind of manage or put up with, to continue testing this space with these people, to continue extending chances, extending self advocacy to them, and allowing them to show me, to what extent they are willing or able to love me. To what extent am I willing to do that? Sometimes, like on a good week, it's like, yeah, I've got so much like margin for discomfort. Other times, it's like, all right, Micah, you might want to cool it for a little bit and go have some introvert time because you don't have a whole lot of margin for discomfort in these relational spaces. And I accept that that's okay.
Babe, that phrase margin for discomfort is going to give so many people permission to say no.
Mm,
I think I was just,
yes.
as you were talking, it made me think of all those coffee dates that our estranged connections want with us. And being able to identify and articulate your own values to yourself is A plus work all day, every day. Turning that into a communicated boundary to someone who has violated your values and being clear and be like, listen, I hold myself in high esteem. You don't. I need you to act this way. You won't. We're done. And
Yeah.
it's not a you thing, it's a me thing. In a true way, like I see you, I've got a standard, no hard feelings, although I mean sad feelings, but not hardened feelings to a degree. I'm
Yeah.
thinking about those people, 5 years down the road that say, "Oh my gosh, it's been so long. It's so good to see you." Like, they have the short memory, and we have the honor of then the honor of then reinforcing our own boundaries again to say, yeah, we fell out because I articulated something and you disrespected it, and that's on you, but I actually don't have the margin for the discomfort of a coffee date with you." Again, no disrespect, this is on me. Um,
Mm,
I feel like that kind of a conversation is so high, like, intellectual to a degree, like, I'm even hearing myself say it, like, "Who talks like that to old friends?" And yet,
mm,
I've said things similarly to people and been met with, "Are you kidding? You're still mad about that from 5 years ago?" "Yeah, girl, because my value of self-worth hasn't shifted." It sounds like the fact that it offends you that I still don't want to be diminished in a friendship tells me all that I need to know. Um,
yeah.
how would you take that over intellectualized statement? Like, how would you make it simple for someone who's like, listen, former pastor of mine, or listen, old roommate, or prior bridesmaid, whatever, I don't want to get together with you because you're not my friend anymore. How do you do that
Mm,
without diminishing that person's humanity? Because you can only say it's not you, it's me. Well, that's even a platitude. It doesn't even sound authentic. Even when you can, draw the line to say, "This is actually the most authentic thing I could say."
yeah. Oh my goodness. Ah, I honestly think the answer is in what you just said, which is that I think you just said it so well, where you hear this person, they're just flabbergasted that you've reinforced this boundary. And they often say something like, wow, you're still mad about that? And I love the way you said no. Like this is a value of mine that you didn't honor then. And I really don't anticipate you're gonna honor it now. And it hasn't shifted. And I
Mm,
think that's what's helpful is helping folks differentiate between how you felt about whatever relational breach happened and what value existed back then for you and probably exists now that informed the boundary that you set. And so, yeah, there's being mad about someone betraying you and, sharing your personal business without you consenting to it, or, you know, insert whatever boundary breach it was. There's being mad about it, there's being frustrated about it, there's being disappointed in it, there's all those feelings. But the value of it is important for me to be able to trust discreet, sensitive information to whomever I'm in close relationship with. Like that is a value. That's not a feeling. That's not you being mad.
right.
So, what it can often come down to in like simple terms is saying to someone, like, look, when we fell out 2 years ago, it was important to me that I could trust you with sensitive, stuff. And I discovered that I couldn't. And it's still important to me that I can trust you with sensitive stuff. And I
Yeah.
really don't feel like trying to test that out anymore. Um,
Yeah.
it's okay to say that to somebody. And what
Yeah.
I appreciate about it is it's value based. That's not a feeling. And so it's going to be hard for someone to come back to you and say something like, oh, it's childish for you to be mad about something. And I've got my own soapbox about how dismissive that is. But
Right.
if you root the resetting of that boundary 5 years later when they're asking you for a coffee date in a phrase like, it was important to me that, and it still is important to me that,
Hmm.
it's going to be really difficult to get some worth I guess worthwhile pushback from that person.
Yeah.
But then really quick, like secondly, I always encourage folks to ask themselves, like, if you have one of these incidents where someone tries to kind of re-enter your life after you've ended a relationship with them because you didn't feel, like your values were respected or you didn't feel relationally safe, the first thing I invite folks to ask is, do you want to make the emotional investment of having the crucial conversation where you get vulnerable again and you tell them, this is the reason why I'm setting this boundary? Like, that is also an expenditure, a spending of emotional energy. And if you don't even feel like you want to spend that, you can just leave it as like, no, no, thank you. I don't want to get together. And
Yeah.
that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. I know it's so easy to want to protect the other person to a degree. I know in my experience, I've
Mm-hmm.
even been so worried about the emotional cost of arguing about why I don't want to spend my time with them that I have just I know that's the avoidance, right? Self-protection that says it's okay to ghost people even though it's not. And being direct is a preferred method of communication, even though it costs so much. And it's interesting
Mm-hmm.
that yeah, I think a lot about too in our communities, like when someone who is not safe to us shows up in our currently safe communities, that can also be really, really jarring. It's,
Mm-hmm.
but again, I love the idea of going back to values and just recognizing in this period of my life, in this time frame, these are the most important values right now. And I want to act out of a place of integrity with my values versus
Mm-hmm.
out of a reaction to what I perceive to be the needs of the people around me or the people trying to get access to me. I want to ask one more question. I'm thinking a lot about online community. In the aftermath of COVID, there have been so many new people joining social media and engaging in a new way that they are building genuine relationships with people outside of their immediate families, outside of their friend groups, to where I think just to a degree that we've not seen before. But I also think that because of the vastness of online communities, so to speak, it's almost impossible to draw some boundaries. And so I'm going to give you a few examples, and I just would love to hear
Mm-hmm.
like some advice that you would have for someone just generally about how to navigate building trust with someone in an online friendship capacity. Nothing deeper than that. So I'm thinking about, let's use Twitter, for example. I comment if I post something publicly and 7 people comment on it, and 6 of those people are connected to me, and one of them is a wild card. I have the block option. That's great because they brought in something inappropriate or off topic. Easy. Or what if all 7 people who comment happen to be connected to me in some way, but one of them is behaving really problematically on another person's page or just in general, or I realize, wow, this person's really causing harm. It's not normal in a day-to-day life to immediately cut that person out of your life because you see them behaving some kind of way. But
Mm-hmm.
there's this weird online demand that we do so, that we immediately ostracize a person because they've made a poor choice, because everything we do online is so public to a degree. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think about people who I've talked on this show about FOMO, when you
Mm-hmm.
create online community and then you feel like you've not been left or you've not been included because you weren't tagged or you weren't directly invited, even though it was an open invitation to a conversation, or you feel like, oh, they're talking and I like to talk about that thing too, but they didn't invite me to the conversation because they could. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
this idea of so many different behaviors that we manifest when we're uncomfortable, when we're isolated, when we're trying to self-protect, when we're trying to cope with all of these secondary losses that come along. What's your best 1 to 3 pieces of self-compassion for folks navigating building an online community in a public setting?
Wow. Super easy question to answer, Mandy. Just,
You
I
know, I
can,
like to lob a softball or 2 to end the show.
right at the end there. Um, okay. A follow-up question is this phrase you just used, self-compassion? Is that the hook? Is that where you'd like me to lean into?
I think in my
Mm,
experience, I see people wounded and lashing out, right? I'm left out,
mm,
I'm gonna blame you. I feel excluded, I'm gonna blame you. My value is attached to being included because I've lost all my other communities and my identity is wrapped up in my role in this community. I might be answering my own
mm,
question here. Um, and so I have to find, in my opinion, a level of self-compassion and a level of acceptance for myself of who I am,
mm,
where I'm at, that I might not be the right fit for everyone. Like admitting that is a big deal.
mm.
Mm.
Oh, yeah. I would 1000% recommend just packaging all of what you just said into one little pamphlet and giving that to everyone. Absolutely. But also like developing community online, especially on Twitter. Oh my goodness, that algorithm is so unforgiving.
It's weird and terrible, and I got called a liar about something I did when I was 14. I'm like, "Bro, what?"
Gosh. Yeah. So I think that would be one thing that maybe I'll just speak for myself. Like I
Hmm,
learning learning that the every social media algorithm is not created to help you build community.
come on.
That's the really kind of weird um counterintuitive truth that we have to accept
Yeah,
is the algorithm is built so that more people continue clicking as many things as possible for as much time as possible.
yep,
And it's not really built to help you feel connected to other people. That's kind of a secondary byproduct
yeah,
that social media platforms, are kind of like, oh, sure, yeah, you can have this this side dish with the thing that we're actually trying to get. So what that comes down to is if your tweets or your posts don't generate a lot of views and a lot of activity very quickly, the algorithm is going to naturally suppress it, and so you're not going to end up in on people's screens as often, and
yeah,
you're not going to end up having as many opportunities to get your post liked and to have people comment on it. And I
yeah,
think accepting that and kind of having that be a kind of just recurring reminder to yourself, like, okay, I know that this thing is just built for something
yeah,
other than helping me feel connected. I think that really helps us to kind of reorient ourselves away from that kind of FOMO, shame based, am I worth paying attention to, even though I've only
yes,
got 7 clicks or 7 likes?
yeah.
Knowing that kind of helps us, steer away from that. Um, but I think another thing too is just, I know one thing I ask myself when I tweet something is, I kind of I imagine different folks from, my past and my present potentially seeing it. And I ask myself, how comfortable would you be with them either interacting with it directly or kind of entering your space without permission and asking you to kind of answer to it or talk more.
Yeah,
Um, and if after asking myself, I'm like, you know what? Nope. I know if a person from this space in my life or a person that hurt me in this way, or insert the rest of the list here,
yeah,
were to engage with this post, I don't think I'd have the energy to deal with that.
yeah,
Oftentimes, that's my gauge for whether I post it. Now I know there's going to be times that, I mean, we change, right? Like you said, something that happened to you at 14 or something you said at 14, it's highly unlikely you're going to agree with that. But, like I know there's going to be a change in what we would tweet or
yeah,
post for time, right? So that's not what I'm putting out here, but it's
yeah,
just a question of if we begin thinking of ourselves and how we honor ourselves and our emotional energy in terms of, in the worst case scenario, if folks who have harmed me re-enter my emotional space through my social media,
yeah,
and I ask myself, how much energy, how much margin of discomfort do I have to deal with that? And the answer is like you've got like 2 milligrams. Then it's like, okay, maybe I don't choose to post it here. Maybe I choose to talk about it with a close friend instead, or a spouse, or I choose to journal about it instead. I think that can be an act of self-compassion as well.
Yeah. I think that it's a really interesting perspective to take once you recognize you have the ability to cultivate your own space. Even though social media is often a very invitational, like open door, walk through it kind of a posting atmosphere, you're absolutely right that you still have the right to say, "Oh, listen, I actually didn't invite you here and I don't consent to you being here, so you're out." And liberally using the block feature, but also recognizing the autonomy you have in your own life, whether it's online or in person in relationships, to create value-based boundaries is an incredibly empowering thing that I know a lot of us have not experienced because of trauma and because of our response to the foundation we were raised with, to that baseline that may have been cracked, that may have been disrupted in some way. I mean, to be honest, I don't know anyone whose baseline wasn't disrupted in some way, which is, of
Mm-hmm.
course, why we are here doing all of this kind of work. But recognizing that and cultivating permission for yourself to really press into your story and becoming curious about, well, what need am I trying to meet by tweeting this or, following this person or and recognizing that our needs are valid. We're not being needy because that
Mm-hmm.
we have needs. We have needs that are asking to be met, and not everybody's going to have capacity to meet them. And having grace and understanding for those that say, "No, thank you. I can't
Mm-hmm.
meet that need for you," is an underrated skill that a lot of communities don't get a chance to teach. So my brain has been so muddled for so long about community loss and about my own experiences and the weight of stories of people I love and I carry, with them. So thank you for making time to have this conversation and to really compassionately lean into knowing that community loss in any form really sucks. Micah, before we go, is there anything you want to like throw out into the world? Do you want people to follow you on Twitter, or is that like hard boundary? No, thank you. What do you want to like talk about anything fancy or just sign off there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty active on Twitter and I enjoy kind of mutual connection on Twitter. So yeah, definitely if you want to follow me, you can find me at J Marie Morgan. But other than that, I just want y'all to be loved and to find healthy ways to love. So that's
Hmm. And I want you to write a book just like that about that thing. That would be amazing. All right, my friend. Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you for being with us. Thank you for listening to episode 79 of Restorative Grief. I wonder if you're like me and you felt the depth of stillness in your spirit the moment Micah started talking about our inherent need for relationships. No one is immune to grief or loss, and we heal best in community. But when that community is the source of our grief, Micah's compassionate but clear steps toward rebuilding trust with others feels a little like learning how to exhale deeply for the first time in a long time. I hope you found something encouraging in her wisdom that you can bring into your own healing experience for community rebuilding, no matter how broad or small the chasm may seem. There is something in this conversation for every one of us because we all need to learn relational repair. If this is your first time listening to Restorative Grief, I would be honored to hear from you through a review or on social media or through my website. Just reach out. I'm active on Instagram and Twitter under @MandyKPart, and connecting with people impacted by this work makes a huge difference every time I put out a new episode. Speaking of which, I want to say thank you again for my patrons and financial supporters of the show. If you are interested in getting bonus content, joining our quarterly chats by becoming a patron, you can look me up on Patreon or become a premium subscriber for the show on Spotify. Either way, be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss out on our weekly episodes. Learn more about all of this in the show notes or at mandykpart.com. And before we go, as always, one last thing. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.